And good night, ladies and gentlemen. Scott Graves here again for another exciting episode, the premiere of season 2 of SMG's Are We Here Yet podcast. I am very excited as we have spent months and months and months preparing for our season 2, even more so than what was a fantastic first season for us. And continuing on with us here in January 2021 is our ever loyal, trusted, professional, exceptional producer, and my good friend and business partner, Mr. Cam McLeod.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm glad to be here. I hope everyone else is glad to be here. Scott, you seem like you're glad to be here. I'm
Yes, I
excited.
am. I am. And I mean that sincerely. Everything I say is sincere, but sometimes with a radio voice, it sounds like maybe I'm being less than sincere. But in fact, I'm really excited about the season that we've put together here. We've got guests that are all great. We've got a lot of interesting stories to tell. And you and I have just been working very hard on the quality of the production and the quality of what we're doing, and it all
Sure.
boils back to really good storytelling.
Right? That's
I
all that comes down to, right?
and Dave Grohl. How's
Oh,
Dave
of
Grohl
course.
there
I
in the
mean,
back?
always ever beautiful hair in the background, always
He's so
watching,
very
always
consistent. He just sits up there on your wall,
very
does his
stoic,
thing.
very
Who would have known Dave Grohl is where is he? He's in Londonderry, New Hampshire. That's where he is.
I just keep them locked in my room all the time.
So tonight, I know Cam is very excited for our guest, as I am, because it's always great to speak with performing artists or artists of any kind. But tonight we have a performing artist, musician, two members of a great band. The name of the band is Western Education. And I'd like to start off with a quote that was recently found in vanyaland.com. Mike Murata's quote from June 2020. Mike says of Western Education, um, Western Ed only know one sonic direction, a forward march. The Lowell alt rock band have been crafting anthemic call to action songs for the better part of the past decade. And today, return with a stirring new single titled New Dawn. By the way, proceeds from all streaming services for that single were and will be donated to Black Lives Matter Boston. He goes on
Oh yeah.
further to say, New Dawn was written in the summer of 2017, says singer and keyboardist Greg Alexandropoulos. I intended the lyric to be a juxtaposition. There are some humorous lines about hipsters, and I take some jabs at the perception of modern millennial culture. But the underlying message is young people need to take control of their lives, take their socio-political future seriously, and stand up for what you believe in. The song is even more relevant in the craziness of 2020. So tonight we have two members of the band Western Education. We have frontman Greg Alexandropoulos, and we also have, forgive me, I've already made my first mistake of season 2. Will, what's your name?
I'm Will Hunt.
Will Hunt,
How you doing?
both of the band Western Education. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
So I have to tell you something. The first time I heard you guys, which was about 5 years ago, this quote I just recounted, mentioning that you guys that the music is anthemic. I like this idea. The first time I saw you guys play, there were multiple moments over the course of the evening that, and I do not say this to suggest that your music borrows liberally from the band Rush, but like being at a Rush concert, there are moments where the crowd is instantly all connecting with you, through you, but also with each other, and the whole place is, I have to say, I dare say it's a little cult-like, because we're all very connected on a strong musical idea for an extended period of time. That is to say that it's anthemic. So what do you guys think about that characteristic, people characterizing your music that way?
Um, I'll start and then Will can take over. I mean, the first thing that popped into my mind is we're definitely not Rush to me because I can't play worth shit. So like, but yeah.
Well, you're setting the bar really high because it's
yeah. I make that joke.
If you're really good at one instrument and not three simultaneously, that's still okay.
Yeah. In terms of the Rush comparison, I think for me the chorus and the music really getting off the runway and having the big moments and that sort of thing is very important to me or important to us. So when you saw us play back then, it really all of the songs have that where we want to establish a musical theme that's not only catchy and you put it in, a pop structure, but we really want to take it to the roof when you hit these big moments. I think something that we always try to do is how to get songs off the runway. I mean, that's probably my biggest critique with music I don't like. Is it doesn't quite hit that peak for me. So I feel like I'm always focused on the next big fist pump chorus.
I get you.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I don't know if like originally we ever intended to be like go out and write anthems, but now definitely I think, we're very consciously, before our music has always had like a lot of, elements that are very loud, and we have the soaring vocals, and, the very fast tempos, and, makes sense. But I think nowadays I think our new album actually has like several that like purposeful anthems. The New Dawn single being one of those, very specifically, like, it's meant to be sort of like a call to action, sort of have an anthemic quality to it. And I think we're comfortable in that sort of space.
What you guys are suggesting would suggest a certain level of awareness, not just self-awareness as artists, but also of both the need for the ups and downs within, the pop music idiom or any sort of idiom. So regardless of what the musical format is that you're working with, to have emotional highs and lows that take somebody somewhere, it shows a certain level of self-awareness, I think, for how, and I mean the word manipulation in a positive way, how to manipulate the audience to maximize their entertainment value. Where do you think that comes from?
Oh, I mean, it's all on purpose. I think, at least for me personally, I mean, you always should be in charge of the puppet strings. Like, it's very intentional. None of our final product is improvised, or we don't fall into these big arrangements by accident. It's,
Right.
We have, whether it's, myself or Will can speak on this too. It's when I envision the song, I obviously have these big moments in mind. I kind of talked about it before. The runway and getting into the air is absolutely on purpose. And when I write music that's very even, or, it's structured in a very specific way to get that intention across.
Mhm.
And the problem that maybe I'll say it like this, where I tend to know where if I maybe present a song to Will or other members of the band, I kind of know beforehand where if this chorus isn't hitting, I don't need people to tell me that it isn't big enough. I kind of say, okay, my intention is for this to really get your fists in the air, and if the reaction is, I didn't do it, and because it's on purpose, I'm not hoping that people bump their fists to this. I want to know, like, it's very intentional, I guess,
Right.
for me to stop around. It absolutely is intentional.
So
Yeah.
is the music, is the actual, and I'll let you speak, Will, in a minute, I'm sorry. Is the songwriting process actually then ongoing? You know what I'm saying?
You mean ongoing in terms of the album, in terms of our lives?
Well, in terms of your lives as live musicians, you've got something that's been recorded, you're playing it over and over again, but the evolution of crowd response can change over the
Sure.
life of the song too. So
Sure.
I guess what I'm saying is, do the tunes evolve over time to meet that kind of criterion of, man, this just isn't hitting it, or even after
Wow.
you've first written it, but it hasn't been recorded. Well,
Wow.
actually, let me ask this. Do you guys experiment with tunes that haven't been recorded yet and go and play them live a lot to have them further evolve until they're at a point where you feel like, okay, this is ready for to be recorded?
Yeah, we
Will,
have
what-
done that
yeah.
before in the
Yeah.
past. We do sometimes do that. When you're talking about like gauging a crowd response too, we actually take songs that we recorded and maybe take elements of them and change them very slightly in order to provoke certain reactions from the crowd. And in fact, nowadays our entire live show is very much on rails, as they say, where even things down to like when the lights happen are very, very intentional. So when you're talking about like the dynamics of like all of our songs together, we're doing a lot of work in the songs and between the songs. We want to make them sound like just like the record, but we also want to make sure that the audience is following along. So, we do things like make an interlude track, or we might, instead of George playing something, we might play a backing track instead. It's all kind of up for grabs depending on, what the needs of the live performance are.
Yeah, and
I
I was
getcha.
I was going to add, Will is definitely correct, where we definitely test run, and we'll just take this album in particular. I think we test run, before COVID, I think four or five songs from the new album that we've been playing live. And now that I'm sort of thinking back to it, because live music hasn't been done for a while, I I feel like I maybe rethought maybe a handful of moments in songs where I thought it was going to get a certain reaction and it doesn't. And so I'm like, oh man, maybe we have to arrange this a little differently. Like if I were to take like one example, I won't spoil too much for the new album, but like on the intro track, I feel like when I hear it on record and it ends and it's Greg alone on the piano, it feels very final and very yeah. But when we play it live, sometimes we end the song and people don't know it's over, and that's bad. We're like, I need people to be like, yes, the song's over, big claps. But then I thought to myself, maybe we need another layer here, like a cymbal swell or guitars and bass all hitting too, so people know it's over. Because little stuff like that tends to jump out at me as maybe we made an error here, or maybe we need to do something to maybe evoke the reaction that we wanted. Little stuff like that, I think, has come out live that I didn't expect.
Right.
It speaks to everybody on this interview has a lot of experience playing live music, and it speaks to the idea that there is, no matter how good it can get as a group of people really connecting musically in a rehearsal room or in the recording studio, there's just certain things that happen, and there's endless reasons why, but there's things that happen or things you can do that you can't be replicated outside of being in front of people and sort of, and I mean this in a positive way, being on the spot. And part of it is adrenaline. Part of it is the fact that you just can create an abstract dialogue with people. That's a lot harder to do, at least beyond the bandmates that you have.
Right.
And that's one of the sort of the singular things about live music playing. Will, you mentioned the idea of all these details, the interludes, and basically crafting a live performance. And that, coupled with what you guys said a moment ago, just about being really, really intentional about the emotional highs and lows over the course of the performance. I'd like to know how you maintain that, and also where you came up with sort of the particular idea for that, only because it's something I think I'm speaking for both Cam and I, like, we really respect that, the idea of really crafting a live experience that's just constant and it's just hitting people. And, it creates that environment where people feel like, man, these guys are working. And I'm just engrossed in this for this time period. I can really let myself go and just be involved in this show and not have to deal with, whatever life, it's all, this show is right there on me. So I'm wondering where you guys sort of came up with that and developed that.
I mean, yeah, we try to make it easiest on ourselves as possible. We do a lot of work in the songwriting phase, and we end up sort of like with chunks of stuff that we kind of rearrange depending on, the needs of the show. So everything that we do is sort of like lined up, but we've already written, for example, when we have one song, we know that like, hey, there's going to be a lot of times where we're going to need an interlude in front of the song. So we wrote an interlude like specifically for that track. Right. We might not use it every single time, depending on where we put it in the set list. But that, like, for example, if we need to take like 2 minutes to tune up for another song, we might play that specific song that has the interlude. So during that time, those of us who need to do so can tune up or change gear or whatever. The important thing for us is that we hate dead air in the performance. I mean, it's okay, like if it's like a punctuation, everything in moderation. Right. But we really want to like maintain a flow. So whether that is, we write an interlude to play during the song every time, or we write like a 1.5 minute piece that we can just pull out anytime. We've even written like 2-second like joke songs that we do like at the end of performances that just like kind of get people riled up, and then we just pull the rug out from under them and leave. It's all just like in kind of, we already kind of know the lines though. Like it's all like on cue cards, and not literal cue cards, but it's all just stuff that we can pull out and like rearrange as needed.
Greg looking across the room. I can't see my cue.
No, do you know what's so funny? You made the Rush comparison at the beginning. Before live music ended, I mean, one of our jokes was Blink-182, but we were gonna do YYZ. right? Isn't
Oh, really?
we were I'm not kidding. Like we were gonna do like 10 seconds of that as a gag, but but then we started the album process and then COVID happened, so we never got to do the gag. But that was
That's
one
an
of them.
inside, brah. That's an inside joke. I mean, I think it's
Yeah.
hilarious, but
No, I know. But what happens is like, Will, did we do Dumpweed? What did we do?
Yeah, for the crowd we play, like it really depends on who's there. So there was a stretch of time where we were like, okay, yeah, like these shows, the people here are really going to enjoy it if we play like 10 seconds of this song that they all know and love, and then just stop
And
playing.
like,
Right?
what's so like maniacally funny is like they're so sad when we don't play the whole song. We literally play 10 seconds after the last note of our song plays.
The
Like,
key
it's like,
is
hey,
to rip those, like you have to absolutely nail, like
right around the time
Perfect,
everyone's
right.
like, yeah, you guys are stopping.
yeah, that's
right.
exactly
they
what
gave us a
happens.
half hour. What do you want? Like,
Yeah.
Right.
No,
Right.
and
It's encouraging to hear you guys talk about these details, about the craftsmanship and everything. When I was coming up, at least in pop rock music, we have this time period where it felt like for a while, oh, that band on that you'd hear somebody's hit over at the radio station in school, and and you'd say these people are never going to go anywhere. I mean, they're not even playing in tune, man, and they don't have a stage act. I mean, the tunes aren't well crafted, and next thing you know, they've got a record deal. And like bands that you felt like you understood what quality was or didn't, they just couldn't get a deal to save their lives. And talk about a constant barrage of positive stage presence. You'd get like, in between tunes, they'd be apologizing. You'd be like, I can't believe this band's touring the country right now. But a lot of that has gone away. You just don't, regardless of genre, like you're not seeing that kind of purposeful self-deprecation. I mean, everybody's different, I guess, but I mean, we don't want that when we go to a show, right? I mean, I don't know what you guys think.
I'm just not about that. I feel like, then again, everybody in our band has their own persona and their own thing within the ensemble that we try to represent, or present as a collective. But for me, like I don't know, Will can definitely speak on this too. I feel like maybe my job or role as a frontman does ask for me to, what's the word? I do have to present myself a little bit differently than other members of the band. Like it's typically me who has to introduce songs or kind of keep the flow of the show going beyond our interlude tracks and our lights. So for me, I'm just not the self-deprecating, look at my feet sort of guy when we play live. I like dressing up and putting on the show and doing that stuff, even though like behind the scenes it's incredibly stressful and I'm pacing for hours. But like on stage, I mean that as a joke, but on stage I don't know, I guess what I'm saying is I feel you 100%. That's just not the character I want to put out on stage. I just don't do that. And also like we don't have the kind of music that calls for looking at your feet and apologizing. You know what I mean? That's just not
Right.
that wouldn't go with the whole, I don't know, mantra of what we do. If I've just like jumped on top of the speakers and like put my fist in the air and I'm raising the mic stand and then I say sorry, it's weird. Like I don't know,
Right,
it's
right.
strange.
The key is to have a plan, right? Like to have everything blocked out, and you don't really have time to think because you kind of just do it by muscle memory. So
Yeah.
Greg says the same thing at the same place, or more or less.
Right. Or if I know we're playing to almost entirely new people, I don't mind like rehashing the same lines or introducing the songs the same way because it's new for them. Like I
Right.
guess Will, you can definitely speak on this too, but when I think about playing live and I think about playing for people, I want it to be for them. Like I am not offended if I'm playing the same song a million times or I'm going to introduce it the same way because it's not for me. I've heard the songs a million times. Like it's really for them, and whatever gives them the best experience, that's okay with me.
Yeah, we just want people to have a good time.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the core of a good band is yes, you are putting your heart and soul into it a little bit, but you also understand at bottom line, your entertainment, you're for the people that are there. So making sure that's in the back of your mind has to be there. It has to be in the back of your
Right.
mind always.
Yeah,
right.
absolutely. 100%.
I worked for a guy years ago, and we toured nationally several times a year. And he would say, wherever we are, no matter what is going on in your life, these people pay good money and they need to be taken somewhere or forget their troubles or whatever the case may be for a couple of hours. And we have to deliver for them.
Yeah.
And it has to be, there is no having a bad night. You have a bad night, you're out of here. I'm going to send you home,
Right.
because these people paid good money to see us at our very best, and we all have to be at our very best for them.
Yeah,
So
and
whatever's going on with you, put that away for a couple hours, take it out after, because these people don't know about that, and they're not supposed to know about that. You have to
yeah, and
give
what
it.
I was gonna add on to that. I mean, especially for for us, like when before all COVID happened and all of that, we were playing between 24 and 30 shows a year. And
Okay.
even though some acts are doing hundreds, I mean, there are obviously bands that play much more than us. But for me, if we're playing 2 shows a month, 3 shows a month, any missed show or any poor performance, that's a big percent for me that we missed that year. Like even
Right.
like 1 or 2 shows out of 24, it's not really acceptable. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's very then again, I feel like Western Ed has just gotten better over time too, whether it's our light show or rehearsal, or us being better musicians or better players because of practice. I think it's rare for us to kind of drop the ball and put on a bad show. I think it happens less and less often. And obviously the better you get, your worse gets better, so your floor increases too. So I mean,
Right,
I'm very
right.
hard on myself. Every live show is different. You're not always in the most ideal sound scenario. It's loud in there, but you do the best you can. But I agree with you. Like, I want to leave it all on the stage every time.
Will, what's your musical influence or influences?
Oh, there are a lot.
Will knows everything about music.
I'm sort of wide ranging. Yeah, I definitely, me and Greg connected over our mutual love of new wave and synth music. I'm also a big punk fan. I love metal, heavy metal, death metal. Huge hip hop fan. I listen to a lot of pop music. Really, anything that is really well produced. I'm a producer as well, so I really appreciate like excellent production, excellent songwriting, musicianship. I also really like energy, so anything with energy. Biggest musical influences really depend on like the time of life you catch me in. So I'd say could be a hip hop artist or a metal artist or
Anything,
no one
right.
specific, but yeah, just so many, so many different kinds of music.
Well, it's good production to you. You're a producer. So what are some of the characteristics of good production? So many producers I've talked to over the years will say, well, when you hear it. Well, that's good
Yeah,
for us to say that.
there is an element of that, like, because there's so many different, you could have bad production and still enjoy the music a lot. You could love the sound of something with technically bad production.
Right.
A lot of my favorite records have really bad production. Like a lot of hip hop records are produced badly, but they are like chart toppers. It's really about the decisions that the engineer or the producer or the artist makes to make the sound unique and to make it exciting. And that decision is completely dependent on the style of music you're working with, the needs of your song, your mindset at the time. It could even change like from hour to hour.
Right.
Even mixing, the way you hear music changes from minute to minute as your ears grow more fatigued or less. So it's really good production to me is just decisions that work in context. Music that feels like something or feels like a texture or feels like has a unique tone or texture to it is good production. Music that kind of makes you think like, oh, I've never heard anything that sounds like this before. Whether that's because it's so loud or it's so dense or because there's nothing there at all. Like it's just like you've never heard this artist because they have recorded everything using a snare, a kick, and just like a cheap recorder, and they're the Strokes.
Right.
Like it could be,
Oh.
so like that. When their biggest album, one of their biggest albums, has like a very rudimentary sound, but could you call that production bad? It's like it's one of the biggest selling records of the millennium. So
Right.
And I think I think the word you use, like context or contextual, is so important. Like that, I feel like that's almost the whole thing, right?
Yep.
There are so many albums that I like that are really good despite how bad the production is, or maybe like it's good even though the production is muddy. I think it comes down to context and songwriting, right?
Yep, energy. And like our touchstone album is Hot Fuss by the Killers. We all kind of as a band sort of agree that record is sort of our platonic rock band ideal for what we've always kind of wanted to go for. Not maybe in terms of strict sound or sonic characteristics, but just energy, that it's just the work of a band that just feels like they're on top of the world when they wrote it, and that there's nothing that can
Right.
stop them. And it's partly because of the production. There's just kind of a madcap energy to it. It's really rough. It's not like a super tight, amazing mix. You can't really hear every element very pristinely. There was nothing like it it sounded like when it came out. Like nothing sounded like that album at all.
Right.
In 2001, it was big budget, pop punk, emo, just topping the charts, really loud masters. And this thing comes. It's like kind of a garagey synth rock album that sounds like the 80s, but it came out in like the
2004.
centuries. Like, what is
Right.
this?
Right.
Is that this is a question for both of you guys. Is that the album that kind of inspired you guys to start the band and start going down the music route? What would you consider the album or the artist or whatever that was like, you're like, yes, I'm gonna do that?
I have to laugh at myself. Will, I got to answer this one first, just because I'm already giggling. You actually, okay, so Cam, you nailed it on the head for me personally.
Okay.
When I was 12 years old, The Killer's Hot Fuss came out.
Okay.
And I remember there was this new website called YouTube that was out in 2005.
The new tube.
Yeah, and I remember being 12 years old, and I went on to YouTube, and I saw the Killers play Mr. Brightside to like 30,000 people at the Glastonbury Festival in England, and I said, I want to do that. How do you do that?
Right, like,
And
how do I
that's
get
in,
there?
yeah, and I mean, if we're talking like, it's the same album too. Like, if we're talking the song that got me into music, it's also on that album. It's Somebody Told Me. Like, I remember I heard Somebody Told Me, and I was like 11, and I said to my mom, what kind of music is this? And then she said, oh, well, it's kind of like the 80s and blah, blah, blah. You get into Depeche Mode and all that stuff. So
Right,
there you go. So you were right with me. I'd love to know what Will's answer is. I don't know if I know this.
Are we asking the album or music band or that otherwise that got me into maybe want to be a musician?
Is there like an album that got you into music, period, or no?
I think I've always been into my parents my mom was a singer, and my dad was always like playing music. So I think like from a very young age, I was kind of just immersed in it. I was in theater, like a theater kid from like age 5. Like my mother would drag me to, choir rehearsals or dress rehearsals. I started performing in those things. So like it's always been like in my family, like starting with show tunes and such. I've always been involved in music.
I get you.
I think the artist that made me kind of realize I liked rock music was probably like Aerosmith was my first rock band.
Nice. Okay.
And then Green Day and Nirvana brought me into the alternative world. And I think those were the bands that kind of made me think, oh, well, okay, music is also like really heavy and cool and like rocking.
Right.
And simplistic, which I kind of like the simplicity of it, the brutality of it. And those are the kind of things that made me kind of think that I could probably want to do this myself.
Right.
I like that.
Yeah, like simple, like, you love Nirvana because the songwriting was brilliant, but they made it look easy. They wrote songs that kind of were simple on the surface, but had a lot of underlying complexity, and no one could replicate that kind of thing ultimately.
It's funny you mentioned that, because they came out in the fall of my sophomore year of high school. And at first, all of us were still steeped, as far as rock music went, we were steeped in, what amounts to heavy metal or, glam
Hair
rock,
metal
all
or
that
whatever.
kind of stuff.
Love it.
Then they come out, and for most of us being young kids, all we could see it just was the antithesis of all of that. And for a lot of us, we just didn't like it, or we dismissed it. But then as you started to really listen, if you still couldn't see the good songwriting and the craftsmanship and what they were doing in the studio, you could at least begrudgingly say, they're being real. And I don't mean the flannel and all that. I mean, like, they're being real. You know what I mean? This is not this isn't arena rock. It's not Cherry Pie.
Right. Right.
That, and Warrant and all that. It's a lot more sincere and so forth. And then, of course, it took the world by storm.
Right. Well, I think part of it, this is just me talking as a musician at this point, because Nirvana, like that alt scene is what I grew up on. Because not to make you sound old, Scott, but my dad is your age, so he grew up in that era, and like that was his shit. That's what I grew up on. That's why Foo Fighters, one of my favorite bands of all time. But like you guys were saying, it's about having that energy, and they, for sure, that grunge movement, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, all of them had that energy for sure. And
I mean,
that's
Dave Grohl just hits drums super hard. That's just what he
that's what he does. That's what he was designed to do.
Yes, he does.
Well, and that music has stood the test of time. That's 25 years ago or so. Or if we go back to the founding of those bands when they first started to record to get deals and stuff, it's 30 years. It's between 25 and 30 years ago, and that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about, well, depending on who you are, I guess, we're not talking about Motley Crue and Warrant and stuff, you know. Even though at the time it seemed like that was never going to end.
Right.
I've always imagined what it would be kind of like in the 80s when like bands like Slayer or Anthrax came along, and what that must have sounded like to ears not accustomed to the speed.
Yeah. Right,
or even that, you know, you have like between about 88 and 91 where you've got bands like Anthrax that did the thing with, I think, was it not Public Enemy? No, it was Public Enemy.
They did that Public Enemy, you're right.
The early Bring the Noise and stuff like that. And yeah, something that I was thinking the other day too is that time period, this like 5-6 year time period, the turn of the coming into the 1990, you know, for a number of reasons, was a far angrier time in pop culture than we sort of realize now. You know, I've been going back to some of that stuff when I started high school, and I was like, wow, it's like, and not just gangster rap, but a lot of, and not just pop music, mind you, but a lot of the temperature of popular culture at that time period was fairly angry. Not so much white suburban America, but there was a big faction of America that was increasingly a lot more impoverished. And we had, even though we don't think of it now, we had a deep recession between 88 and 91 due to a savings and loan scandal. And so there was, you know, there's some, to some extent, temperature-wise, is a parallel to right now. And it was caused by many of the same reasons, interestingly. Before we get off of the band, let's just introduce the bandmates' names here that aren't here. If one of you would, and then we'll sort of let this segue wherever the hell it's going to go. We'll get off the rails.
Sure. Yeah, sure. So our bandmates who are not on the show, Giorgio Brufus is our guitar player, and Devin Valancourt is our drummer, and we're all UMass Lowell alumni. We all met there.
Hell yeah, that's awesome.
So and I'm a graduate of the program 2002. You guys graduated, I think, and I would have graduated in 98. I was on the slow plan, which I'm not ashamed of, by the way. I don't say that because I'm ashamed. I say that because literally I took my time. And when did you guys graduate?
It was at different years. Will, when were you?
I went between 2004 and 2008, went back to grad school between 2010 and 2011.
Nice.
And
Yeah,
I think Greg and I graduated around the same time, grad school in his.
Yeah. Like, I finished my undergrad around 2014, and then George and Devin were similar, but I think George went through a master's program, so he was there a little longer. I think Devin and I were just undergrad. Well, I know I was undergrad. I think he was too. It was somewhere between between 2000, if you were 2012, between 2012 and 2015.
So this is a highly educated band. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are about, before we start talking about the music business industry now.
Sure.
I should also say, most of you, well, were you all music business grads, or it sounds like, Will, you might've been SRT, right? Sound recording.
I was SRT, right. Yep.
We should mention to the crowd here, the SRT is sound recording technology, right?
That's right.
People are going, SRT. Is that something I can catch?
Yeah. We use it as shorthand in the band for everything related to audio, because that's just what it was called when we were at UMass Lowell. SRT was anything audio. So now when George asked me a question about it, he's like, "Hey, you know this SRT stuff?"
Yeah, I have an SRT question for you.
We used to friends that we were all business partners early on, and this one gentleman who was an SRT kid, when he needed to look smart in front of us, or sometimes so that he could shut us up from what we were trying to say, you know, like, we want you to do this. And so he'd start going into the technical reasons why. And at a certain point, we'd know he was making it up. Not because we were super smart engineers or anything like that, but he had certain like facial features and things that would tell you that he was lying. And so we would say, stop with that SRT psychobabble.
Yeah. No. As soon as Will says, "Yeah, I'll pan the bass hard left at plus 12 dB," you know he's kidding. Right?
Yeah, I tried that tactic, I think, in the beginning, but then I realized that, like, for the purposes of the band, it didn't really matter. We just wanted the results. So
You're like,
Yeah.
I'll just do it. It's
Yeah.
Okay, so in all seriousness, how did your education affect, good, bad, or indifferent, what you bring to the table as a craftsman, as a technician, maybe, or
I mean, Will, do you want to speak on that first?
yeah, I mean, in general, being like the education aspect of it, it teaches you how to learn, how to ask questions, and how to like better yourself and get better. So that's like the first thing, like just the tenacity. It gave me firm grounding to stand on when writing music. I think just competency with the instrument is probably the biggest thing that UMass Lowell, I think, really offers, because no matter where you're going in music, they still make you choose an instrument and stick with it for 4 years.
oh,
Yeah.
Which I cannot. I mean, that was so valuable. And in fact, when I went back to grad school, I decided to continue taking lessons because of that.
nice.
And obviously the SRT aspect of it, the audio recording, my line of work, is, it gave me a firm foundation. I came out of there a trained professional. So, I mean, it was really, UMass Lowell don't have enough good things to say about that program. I consider it one of the best schools in the country, and I never trade it for the world.
Yeah,
yeah.
I kind of have to agree. I have to agree with you on that first point. The first thing I was going to say is, like, I was in the singing department for 4 years, and it's so interesting, like, thinking back to me at like 18, like sort of what I could do as a vocalist, and maybe 9 years later, how much better I've gotten. And a big part of that is like really having to drill singing in tune. Like, I think to everybody out there who watches these singing shows and think they're an authority on singing, singing in tune is very hard, like, to do it really well.
what to do
And
it night after night.
yeah, exactly, and really well ever.
Yeah.
And I think, real honestly, going through the ear training program, I'll talk about music business too, but I think honestly that the ear training program was one of the biggest things for me. And that might sound weird as a singer saying I had a hard time like singing scales and patterns in tune, but unless you drill it and you really get into it, it is very, very hard to do.
You have
And
to drill it.
yeah, you got to
Right.
drill it. And I came into college with a theory background. It was really the singing in tune and ear training stuff was huge for me in that program specifically. I think the music business program, I mean, what's the word? Invaluable. I mean, I wouldn't know anything about, like, God. Well, let's go back to 2010 to 2014. I wouldn't have known anything about whether it's royalties or performing rights organizations or almost anything. I mean, use a music business word, and I learned it in my professor's classes.
Right.
And I think it was just invaluable. And I don't know another way to say it. I mean, I really think if I were to break it all down, ear training 1 through 4 and music business 1 and 2, if you only could audit 6 classes in your life, take those.
It's
think
funny
they're
too.
invaluable.
Both of you mentioned the craftsmanship aspect of this. We keep coming back to that
Yeah.
specifically. And it's funny, until you get out into the industry and you meet people that also came out of these music business programs in various places, you don't realize that ours, UMass Lowell is one of the few places where you're really required to meet the requirements of the performance degree. And then you either are sound recording technology or music business, music education, and so forth. And you don't realize that, like, I don't know if you guys had back in school, but years ago, while I was in school, I just assumed everybody was doing that. And then I went out into the world and I met people who were very facile at being in business. But they would say, yeah, well, I went to music school too, but I picked up an instrument so that I could get in the program, because there really wasn't any requirement that you needed to play anything. And I thought, wow, that's different, because your perspective too, your business perspective is much different if you have, and you can learn it in another medium too, but if you haven't practiced some medium within the arts, your approach to working with both the medium and with the artists themselves, your respect for the craft, for one, is entirely different. I'm not saying you can't have a respect for the craft, but it's still going to be different unless you've actually practiced it long-term yourself.
Well, I was going to say, like, it really depends, like, what you want to get out of the program and what your goals are, if you have them, right? Because like for me, for example, like if you ask me, like when I went through the music program, I am a singer and a piano player. That's easy mode in a music program because I can pound out everything on the piano and crush these classes. Like for guitar players or maybe people who don't have the background I had, school may have been much harder for them. And also, I mean, for me, like I wanted to be a songwriter and be in a band. There isn't a UMass Lowell class that says this is how you get bandmates and be a band. That's
Right.
it's not. I feel like that's really hard. And when you go out into the business, and I know you were saying like maybe you need a perspective on, one. It really depends what you want to do in the business, right? Because I mean, I'm not going to snuff my nose at like I don't know, someone who's a promoter who puts on shows, or maybe they're a talent buyer, and I don't know, and they don't know, I don't know, and they're not a great guitar player. It doesn't matter to me. I mean, that I feel like perspective is important, but it depends like what you wanted out of the program and where you intend to take that. I mean, if you want to be a musician and you didn't get a good musical foundation in school, it's probably going to hurt you. But it depends what you want to do, right?
Right.
That's fair.
Well, I
that's fair.
think also though you should have empathy. So in other words, if I'm once you get into business, you have the interests of the people you work for and with that you
Yeah.
need to meet, and sometimes inevitably those come in conflict with the other parties you have to interact with in order to
Sure.
transact business. Um, and it becomes a lot easier, as an example, to nullify or disqualify the needs, wants, desires of the artist on the other side of that transaction if you've never been the artist. If
Sure.
you've been the artist, but you also want to be a successful business person, and that hopefully you have the empathy coupled with the skills to get creative about how do I do this in a way that will, as close as possible, benefit everybody. Everybody's going to get a little something, and everybody is preserved in that transaction to come back to another transaction in the future. I haven't expended any constituent in this transaction. I guess that's more what I
Sure.
refer to.
No, I understand. I'm just trying to think, like in my experience, if I've, in terms of like, if we're talking the live business, I haven't experienced too much of that. The people who I mean, I'm going to leave everyone's name out of this. The people who I've loved working with live and the people who I've hated working with live, that's who they are. Like people who are pricks, they're pricks to
They're
me every
pricks.
time.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, come on, man. Like I've had people who have
chronic.
not paid me the full fee, or who are, what's the word? They're very cagey with contracts. That's who they are. Like I feel like perspective. Yes, you need to. I guess you're right. Like if I am an artist and if I put on shows, would I want to be fair to those artists? If I'm if I'm going to go the humanitarian option, absolutely. But if I'm a prick, sure, maybe I would fuck you. Like I don't know. Like, you know what I mean? Like if I had bad intentions, I feel like I would do that anyway. I'm not debating you. I'm trying to think, like in my experience, if I've seen that. I'm not sure. I'm not
Well,
sure if I have.
You mind if I just
Yeah.
So based from
Oh
what you were
wait,
saying
you're gonna
earlier.
tell all the ways I'm a prick. Don't do that, Ken.
No, that would take forever. I couldn't do that. That's no,
Dude.
from just what we were talking about earlier, just kind of that idea of empathy, but also what you were saying, Greg, like there's not a class on how do you get your bandmates and how do you start a band. So I think that just as from an outside perspective of it, that's kind of just like one of those growing pain type things. You have to just kind of roll with the punches and figure out what works, what doesn't, type scenario. You know what I'm trying to say? You get me?
No, I agree. You know what? It's funny that you say that, because now that you kind of racked my brain with that question, I've experienced both kinds of people. I mean, we as a band, everything. I have experienced bands who treat other bands poorly. I have seen that as well. We've experienced that as a band. Like, I'll leave all bands out of this, just because, I'm not here to take shots at other bands. We absolutely, have been mistreated by other artists. Absolutely. Like, and we've absolutely been, treated well by other artists, and it takes all kinds. I think that's a very hard question for me to answer.
That's
So,
fair.
Question on perspective.
Good perspective. In the transition here into talking about the business, I would first like the two of you to set the stage for our listeners who don't know you. What is the business to this band leading up to COVID? Because COVID is sort of the elephant in the room, right? It's drastically changed everything for all of us. We're all in contingency mode. We're all in plan B or plan C. But up until that point, this 4 or 5 year process of the band evolving, what does this band being in the industry look like?
That's a great question. I'll start, and Will, if you want to add on, go ahead. What does this band being in the industry look like? And an aspect to it is we like to release a steady stream of content. So, we put out a record, at the end of 2016 going into 2017. We put out one in 2014, and we support that with playing about 24 shows a year. In between 2017 and now, we've put out, a series of singles leading up to this album. And pre-COVID, really, we went on tour in 2018, and we played a lot of shows that year. And then we went into album mode to, do our next cycle of content. And then, we're going through the record process, and then COVID hit. And so now it's a whole different world. Because if you ask me, what was this band like, before this? I mean, it was us just, what's the word that every band is trying to do? You're trying to reach as many fans as possible, whether that's online or in person playing in front of them.
But and touring for you guys wasn't playing from nightclub to nightclub between Boston and Lowell. You guys were playing Canada. You're playing Japan, I think, or
no, we didn't go to Japan, but we did.
You didn't go
Canada.
For some reason, I would
love to. I would love to. I mean, hey, if you want to fabricate that we did, that's fine. We played in Canada several times, toured the East Coast. I mean, I think where we sort of ended before COVID started was we were extending sort of our route of where we were going and trying to build fans is what we were doing. That's my perspective. Will, why don't you speak on that?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak on the part of the business of like the releases. I think, Greg, what you said, releasing a steady cadence is important. I think for a band, it's different, and it really depends on what band you are. But there are some artists that would prefer to release like a new album, or 2 new albums a year, like such a huge output. There are so many more artists that are doing that now because music production is easier and cheaper. Right. Our sort of approach to that has always been a little bit less. So we will only put out an album when we have completed like enough good songs that we think are good, and to release it. And that usually for us has been around maybe 1 or 2 years per. Our most recent full length was an EP. Yeah. Right now we're looking at different ways. We have new songs, so we're intending to release a new album, and there's going to be a certain number of singles. There's going to be a certain number of there's going to be a certain number like we're going to need single artwork and things like that. The question is like what is the cadence that we want to release those things at, and like what's going to grab the most attention. I think that's kind of like what the business is even now. More so because we're not relying on shows as much to get the word out. People don't get to hear us live, so thinking up different like ways we can diversify our content and what kind of offerings we can make that'll keep people entertained that isn't live playing, in addition to music releases. So it's kind of changed the way we're looking at being in the business, because being in the business now is no longer just play as many shows as possible, get as much exposure as possible. Being in the business now is like, how can you who are you actually reaching? Who is out there that actually needs to like see your music, and like how do you get to them, and what kind of content is going to be there?
How are you faring in a world where this whole this idea of the democratization of musical distribution was supposed to be this miracle, and of course it wasn't, right? Because now you have millions of very talented artists and all competing on the same bandwidth, as opposed to we can all find plenty of bandwidth. I mean, how do you guys cope with that? How do you think your results are, whether you measure that in comparing yourself to other industry peers, or strictly on your own measurables of either money or exposure, or both? How is that whole process working for you?
If I may, I've always kind of wondered what it would have been like for us if we had started making music in sort of the Sam Goody era, where CDs were still very popular and record labels had more physical sway. With whether things for us would have been very, very different. I would answer that question like the democratization of like the bandwidth of people's attention, I think has made things a little bit more difficult for all artists. Music. But the other side of that is that music is now much more fragmented, and that people are free to explore into their various niche interests. So you can always find some sort of audience, no matter what you're doing, no matter how weird and crazy it is. And as long as we can find that market of people, that really, for our style of music, it depends as well, because, you know, obviously rock isn't the most dominant form of music anymore. Rock bands getting together and making music are probably not doing like as big numbers as like regular artists. I'm not regular, but like solo artists, or like,
Right.
for example, like someone making hip hop music, or producers or singers.
Right.
It's just not the same anymore.
Even the concept of a band in the selfie era feels like, you know,
Weird.
it's like the antithesis of that.
Yeah, like anyone could be a band now. Like
Yeah.
I've seen producer duos be called bands, and it's just shorthand now. Just like how like any singing with auto-tune is now called rapping. Yeah.
No, I was just gonna say, like, to me, the first thing that jumps out at me is I feel like the main thing I think about now is like algorithmic playlists and curation. Example, like, you know, when we distribute a single through our digital distributor, you have, if you let enough downtime go by, you know, or blah blah blah, you schedule your release correctly, you can submit, or, you know, whatever the word you want to use, submit your music to like Spotify curators and people at Spotify who put together playlists that millions of people listen to. So when I think about what did you call the democratization of music, or the democratization of that? There are a lot of bands, artists competing for that very same thing, and it's even more squeezed because now you can't play anywhere.
Right.
And it's a very strange sort of cycle where, when you think about Spotify, or you think about Pandora or other things like that, the more your music gets played, the more your music gets played for people who have never heard you. So it's kind of like a vicious revolving door, where if you can, example, we had some success with this with New Dawn that came out.
Mhm.
I'm going to say some, because it didn't get 4 million hits. What we did was we stimulated, you know, our core fan base to play the song on day one, and it got a couple of thousand hits. And then Spotify showed that song to people who like bands of our genre, and we got more plays out of it. If we didn't stimulate our fans day one, it would have gotten even less traction, and it would have gotten fewer hits, because it's based on algorithms. How popular is your song? If it's more popular, we'll play it to more people. So when I think about what you asked me, it's that, because if we can't play, I'm putting all my money in that, I guess.
Right.
There you go.
Right.
That's my answer.
I'm wondering about this. It's a bit of a conundrum. It is to me, anyways. This, you know, we are deep into sharing files and into streaming. Okay, down the idea of a mature marketplace for downloads. It never really sort of matured, and then streaming happened. Streaming was right on the heels of that, and then streaming became the predominant monetization of music. In the amount of time it's taken for what has become the business model, the predominant business model, you know, the monetization of music as it stands right now, why haven't we seen more artists either working individually or as groups? And I'm specifically talking about the established artists, the artists who made money in the old business model, creating successful alternatives to the current, you know, behemoths that replaced. So when I was in school, the people we vilified, we loved, we wanted to work for, and at the same time you'd vilify because you're a college student. You know, first it was like 10 major record labels, and then the next year I was in school, there were 7, and then the next year there were 4, right? So by the time I graduated, there were like 3 or 4. And then it became, you know, the Spotifys of the world, these major services, right? I mean, it seems to me, why aren't there more artists creating artists, whether it's on a co-op model or different? The technology exists. We don't need any new technology. What we need are better financial models that are more fair and equitable, so that everyone can make money. Because right now it seems to me that tech companies make money. They make a lot of money. Some of that money is being used in lobbying power to secure their long-term level of profitability, you know, based on not fairly sharing that money with the artists whose content is making them that money. And I feel like it wouldn't be that hard other than lobbying power, political power, both inside the industry and in Washington, to create alternative streams. That the innovation really would be the financial model, because we really don't need technology to be any different than it is. And I'm wondering if you guys have thought about that and what your thoughts are.
Yeah, like I mean, the tech companies are the like kind of the only ones that have really the power to build anything like that at scale, right? So like Spotify works because everyone wants to use it because it's easy to use and it's cheap. And Spotify, I think last I checked, they were losing millions every year. And they were
Yeah,
like,
their stock goes up every year and they haven't made a dime.
yeah. So,
Really?
I mean, it's definitely like, it's one of those situations where if you have like, you need a ton of capital to even break into like the initial and like that space, the people in it aren't super interested in setting up like a co-op model for benefiting artists because that's not where the money is. But that being said, there are a couple of models that are doing well, like Bandcamp is, I think, if not co-op, it's definitely more geared towards getting artists exposure and getting artists paid, and they have a lot more incentive for artists to get on there. It isn't exactly you can stream music on there. It's made for buying music. It isn't quite like Spotify, but I would say it kind of approaches that scenario that you might be describing.
Is it gaining in market share where it would suggest that perhaps that becomes a predominant financial model in the future? Or, I sit as now an outsider. I don't work in the record business, nor have I for more than 20 years. I just don't understand why some of these other financial models haven't, not just taken hold, but become predominant.
Well, I was going to speak on that for a second. The thing about Bandcamp is it's very artist friendly, but it's not friendly to your average music fan. Where by that I mean, example. I have a very good example of this. Let's go back like I don't know, 5 or 6 years. My mother was like, "Oh, I want to buy your song on Bandcamp," but I went to Bandcamp, but I didn't trust putting my credit card in it because she doesn't know what it is. So when you think about is there a cooperative way or a better way to stream music? You have to have the public believe in it too, which is really hard. So like everybody has Spotify, quote unquote, everybody. It's ubiquitous. Or if you're an Apple user, you have Apple Music.
That's a really good point.
Even like Tidal is struggling. And I mean, dude, it's so bad where like I'm now like an exclusive Spotify streamer. Like I do it now too. And it's like, go ahead. I was gonna say it's hard.
Yeah, like no, you're sorry, Greg. No, I didn't mean to interrupt. You're absolutely right. I was just excited because you're kind of touching on something there. It's like I've heard it said that the new model that we're in right now is amazing if you're a music consumer, but not if you're an artist. Like the business model of streaming as it is right now is simply like very, very good for music listeners.
Right.
But the way it's set up for artists is just there's no like virtually no profit in it unless you're at the very top echelon.
Yeah, I mean, what does it break down to? About 7 million plays per like $30,000, something like that. It could be even less than that. It's low. Like if you want to make like a minimum wage salary on Spotify, you need tens of millions of plays.
Well, and if you look at gross sales, you guys mentioned a little bit about not net sales, but about profitability. Whether it's a loss or a gain every year. And for Spotify, I can't speak specific to that company, but to the companies doing streaming in general.
Yeah.
It has less to do with gross sales, net margin, and more to do with the fact that their capital raise to become companies was done partially through venture capital and partially through the stock market. Yeah. So the funny business that happens with money on the stock market has more to do with, we always take losses all the time. Okay. They're strategically placed in accounting to do so. And so it has more to do with the financialization of the markets. Over the years, you talk to any individual citizen and you say to that individual citizen, if you have a choice between going to a major corporate, music store, I owned a music store for 5 years. And if you have a choice to go in a corporate store or coming to a small independent, as long as that small independent has everything you're looking for at the price you want and the service and blah, 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 who would you prefer? They're going to say the independent. Yeah, but in the aggregate, consumer behavior does not speak to that. It just doesn't.
Not at
Okay.
all.
What would it take to get an average Spotify user to switch over to Business X? Like they would have to have the infrastructure of Spotify. They would have to have the amount of artists that are on Spotify, which is like everybody.
Right.
That's
the
right.
barrier to entry there is just so high.
Including indies
But,
like us.
but here's the thing.
Right,
You've
right.
got, at the end of the record business as we knew it in the 20th century, you have artists like Prince, who, you know, finagle their way through their time, talent, and treasure to not only owning the rights to all of their material, but doing things like making their own discs. You know, he would call companies like the one we were running at the end of the 90s and just say, I'm going to do my own short runs because I can get it for, I'm Prince, I can get it for pennies on the dollar, and I've got enough friends in distribution that I can actually get them distributed. And this is at the infancy, of course, of independent sales online. Now he's already made his name and he's made his money, so he can do this, right? David Bowie starts selling stock on the publicly traded markets in himself to fund albums, and ends up, the first time he does it, making enough money to make like more than, I mean, he died before he was able to make money with make albums with all the money he made that first shot. But then he keeps doing it, right? Because people know that it's a sure bet because he's David Bowie. And we haven't seen a parallel with stuff like that in our current marketplace, where one or several established artists with the capital to do so saying, well, the technology already exists. For companies like Spotify, and this is opinion time now, you know, it's not a fact. You look at their gross sales since they started, you look at really what you think R&D in coding can cost. For them to lobby in Washington not to change the royalty formula based on, well, here we are 15 years later and we're still recouping our losses in research and development. And this is a company that's made something like $6 or $7 billion or more in gross sales. Scientists cost a lot of money. They do. But their burn rate hasn't been, and then this is a company that raised money through venture capital and continues to sell stock. So
I mean,
I find all of this hard to believe.
No,
guess.
I
Maybe
do
I'm gonna
too.
get shot
But
after this goes public, but you know.
I mean, like I find it hard to believe too. But what I also think about is it's just not, what's the word for this? It's just not a conducive model to run music that mutually benefits consumers and artists. It just doesn't work, right? Because they raised a lot of money through venture capital and stock, right? They haven't made a profit ever. Like they're still losing money. They have to.
Well,
pay
they're
artists.
officially no, but
right. Officially, they artists want to get paid more money. In theory, they haven't made a profit, you know, or to pay back investors. So what do you do? Like, I have no idea. I mean, it's one of those things where, like, it's a very vicious cycle of, yeah, we want more money, but we want more money. So what do you? I don't know. I have no clue what you do.
We might be revealing
do you make
sort
Spotify
of like
paid only? Go ahead.
So we might be revealing like some underlying social issues here, because like when you think about it, you know, what artists, like there aren't very many artists that choose to like diversify further into music. They diversify into other industries. The last kind of like major, unless there's an artist out there that started some music platform that I don't know and they kept their name out of it, Tidal is the only big one that I can remember. And the major differentiating feature for Tidal is audio quality and not like equity. Among other, and at least not that I can recall. And then you have like Akon, who is now like trying to invest in like his own like city state with his own currency. And it's like, when a billionaire artist can do that, why would they go back into you know, like trying to make an equitable music model? I mean, they should. I think it's just like we have these like this social issue that like music is sort of devalued. And that an artist,
it's funny you say that, Will, because that's what I feel like. There's a parallel in the financialization of our economy in the aggregate. There's all these issues that really, when we start talking about them, like as the four of us are right now, it really boils down to education. When we've trained generations of Americans and other consumers in other major markets around the world to think of all art as content and not as human expression, we've dehumanized it, we've devalued it, and it becomes really easy to accept the delivery of it at the expense of the artists.
The monetary value of a WAV file is 0 in 2020. It's nothing. Like
Right.
it's like I feel like this. I don't want to say it started with iTunes and the 99-cent song, but you can kind of see it trickle down from there. You know what I mean?
For
Where
sure.
a song
Well, I
was
know.
worth it. Yeah,
I mean, these are part of the reasons why I left the record business as a young
yeah.
man in his late 20s after some financial success, and thought, well, how much worse can it get? Well,
Hey, yeah, there you
hey,
go. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you're looking at it. Yeah, it's no, it's just I almost feel like I don't want to say it started there, but you can see the seeds there. Now people think to themselves, this value of a song is $1. Okay, well, it's okay if I copy a song and steal $1. $1 is not a lot of money, right? And then it
Right.
just keeps happening. Spotify, then now you can listen for free, and it just keeps going downhill. And royalty rates and the law is so far behind the technology by what, 20 years?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's unbelievable. When was the last royalty rate change? Was it 97? When was that? The 9 cents on per song per album. When was that?
I think it was I think it was either a little sooner than that within the last 15 years, or in the last 15 years there was an attempt made and they successfully lobbied to delay. And I
Right,
can't
right.
quite
You
remember
get
right
you see
now.
what I'm getting at. Where 15 months is too slow for how fast the music business changes, let alone 15 years or 20.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
With music making becoming even easier now, there's just more of it. So it's
Right.
only getting, I wouldn't call it a race to the bottom because, you got more people creating, but it certainly kind of seems to line up with this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
creating that culture of creation is very important, vitally important. But creating quality is also important and is a lot harder to do on a mass scale, arguably. All thought provoking. We're not going to solve the problem right now, but this is good for the non-musicians in our listenership to really hear and start to ask these questions. This segues into something excellent because you had just mentioned about where things stand right now. So we bring this into the current moment, and in a lot of ways, streaming created an environment in which it's like a return of sorts. 100 years ago, the predominant way to make money in this industry was to be a promoter, to own chains of Orpheum theaters or other chains of live venues, vaudeville, the vaudevillian days, where the money or the predominance of revenues came from live performance and the food chain within live performance. We create the modern record business, and now we've sort of returned, especially for individual bands and musicians, where live the creation of music and your live performance is what's driving a lot of your revenue. Whether that's because you're using that to promote your independent music sales, and or bands that are making their money on apparel and merchandise, where virtually all the money can be made if you're making that stuff yourself, right? And it's one of the few aspects of the process that you can make as much net margin as you can. So that's what we are. And then all of a sudden, fate and the gods take all of that away from you. So what the hell? Let's as we have earlier in this conversation, let's start with Western education. So what the hell are you guys doing?
You mean like as a band right now?
Yeah, with all of this, with COVID happening, and with like, we don't know for sure when it's going to end, but of course we're dragging it out, kicking and screaming every week.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
I understand.
States,
I'll start, and Will, feel free to chime in. I mean, I feel like most artists or most musicians are going to have a similar answer. It's tough. I mean, when we put New Dawn out, we just donated the proceeds because we said, well, number one, it's a good thing to do. Number two, it's like, we have no idea when our album is going to come out. We can't play it. We can't perform it. It's, what do you do? I almost feel like we're going to keep, I don't want to, spoil the plans here, but I feel like what you got to do is you got to put out one single at a time, keep your listenership going, and, God willing, this music comes back, you can try to continue from there. But it's hard to, what do they say in Lord of the Rings? There isn't going to be a home to go back to, right? Because if every venue is like closing down, right?
Right.
I mean, it's such a loaded question. Will, feel free to speak on it. But it's, besides keeping up your listenership and donating, our proceeds, that's really all I've got.
Yeah, I mean, there's a dark side and a light side. I mean, from a personal, we're all in the band lucky that we all are still working and that we can support ourselves outside of the band. But it can't be understated or overstated how devastating it is to suddenly not be able to play live shows anymore as a musician. It's just something that me personally, I've always done all my life. It's always something that I've been able to do through everything, you know, going out and playing with the band, touring with the band, and then not having that anymore, not being able to like go out and play a show. That's a real, like, you wouldn't think, but it's a real missing piece. So that it's like being a musician, you know, this was your entire life's work. Not being able to do that anymore. It's just like, what the heck?
Yeah, and also like Will, like all the people involved, whether it's stagehands, people who run the venues, like all that stuff is involved.
It's the whole
ecosystem. Yeah, the industry, like overall, has been like people are out of work, and you just like it really sheds a light on how many people are affected, like in just one segment of the industry. So that's the dark side. The bright side, at least for artists, is that it sort of levels the playing field just a bit, because there are always we're always going up against like competition where, you know, they might have more resources or time to tour more, to get in front of more people, to I think now it's a little bit more level. If you look at it from like anyone can, like we can put out a record just like Justin Bieber can put out a record right now. Like we can decide to make a release.
Well, I hope you
have
put out
most
a
of the same
record
avenues.
just like Justin Bieber.
Hey, we cover Justin Bieber, so
we did cover him a couple of years ago.
I admit, I get the Bieber fever.
Kind of flagging in his relevance now, but at any rate, like he can go out and drop a single, and we can go out and drop a single, and we have like essentially the same tools to work with in terms of exposure, and just like not always the same, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So like I think what we kind of started doing was thinking about, like, unfortunately, more of like a content strategy than specifically a show strategy. Like how can we engage our audience? Like, first of all, where are those people, and how can we just like keep on activating them like continuously over time? And does it have to be music? Can it be something else? Maybe it can be just like one thing. Like, what does our posting schedule even look like? It just kind of made us step back and look at our non-tangible interaction with our user base. Sorry, with our listeners, and so there's sort of like been a light in the dark.
Yeah, I mean, Will's right. Like when we put New Dawn out, and we had to kind of, what's the word for it? We literally had to have Zoom meetings every week and say, what we got to come up with a content schedule. We got to shoot stuff back and forth electronically. And how do you want to proceed here? It was a huge learning process that is beneficial. If there was anything to gain from it, it was that.
So it sounds like a parallel to a lot of other industries right now, where you can find ways to remote deliver. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of businesses that were entirely in person, right? But there's certain aspects of their service or their product line that it turns out you can either remote live or remote for a fee download type thing. But coming out of this pandemic, for those that are truly creating good quality stuff, it can turn into a whole other revenue stream at that point. So you can return at some point in time back to interacting with your consumer in the flesh, but that doesn't necessarily mean that this other revenue stream goes away. And I'm wondering if for you guys, it's a listenership thing, and maybe there's a silver lining if in fact, for those groups that can, or those artists that can sort of, overcome, I guess, create a wave would be more like it, that is sustainable, that they can get the amount of attention necessary to be able to meaningfully monetize that, and to have that monetization be sustainable month upon month upon month. I
mean, that's the model a lot of like companies are taking, and it might be like, it's a lot of bands are kind of going in that direction too. And there might be even more of an opportunity because everyone's sort of in the same boat right now. We're all at home. I'm sure that there are a lot of people that are discovering music for the first time now that they've had a second to kind of not have to be in the rat race every day. Right. If you're working from home, maybe you're listening to more music or making more music. A lot of bands are capitalizing by, they're even doing live performances, like holding concerts that are socially distanced, like remotely. Just they're still on top of it, I guess by necessity, really. But they're like, ultimately might be some good that comes out of it from that.
I mean, when's the last time that circumstances were such that you had as many people as you do, and you can almost sure as hell bet how they're interacting with the rest of the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There isn't that sort of diversification of, I participated in some political campaigns this past election cycle for some friends who were running for office. And, um, for those that said, look, I'm not an online person and I'm not going to run any online campaigning. It's like, then what are you going to do? Because that's where the people are. But the good news is you're assured that's where they are, because there's really not any other credible alternative, so it does create that sort of like, okay, we know this is where the folks are. And, this is the closest in 100 years we're going to come to a truly captive audience. And some predictability in that process, to the numbers that we have. So how do we make hay while the sun is shining,
I'm sure a lot of other artists, there are a lot of artists now that are just like, what, fuck it, it doesn't change for me at all. Like all I do is sit in my bedroom and make beats and post them on SoundCloud, and I get millions of listeners.
Right.
True.
So, it's
Right,
definitely, it was already a different world for music when this happened. And maybe this is accelerating a lot of stuff. I don't know.
Right.
It feels like that. It feels like that economically and so forth. It feels like that,
Is that live stream, because you brought this up earlier, Will, is that live streaming, that remote live performance, whatever, is that something you guys have thought about doing? Is that something?
Yeah.
You're
I mean, even
planning to
before
do?
COVID,
Yeah.
the audio tree set, and something we have done, not live streamed, I don't think. Well, actually, no, Facebook Live we do that all the time. You can live stream a show on Facebook. We've done, I was going to mention Audio Tree. We did the Litterbox sessions in Lowell, which was a live performance on YouTube, and things like that. Things like Audio Tree were coming up and becoming more popular even before COVID, and now I'm sure that they're just like taking off, because this is really the only place where a band can get together and play, and it sounds even better live than live, really, because it's they're recording it in studio.
Right.
And we definitely have been in the talks, as a band about, when we go about doing these singles, do you want to do a live stream video? Do you want to do a performance video? Should we,
something like that?
Things. I mean, we've absolutely talked about it. I just think, with COVID and all the bumps in the road, I mean, but absolutely. I mean, we haven't done it yet in terms of this record, but for sure, I'm sure that's going to come down the pipe.
Things for musicians were busy before COVID.
Say that again?
Like things before COVID were already heating up.
Yeah. Yeah. Then the world got set on fire and it just got harder.
Right.
I mean, I would imagine in the aggregate, the hardest challenge for you is the ever diminishing, the capability of the significant portion of the population to have enough expendable income and time to participate in the arts. And that goes for any arts education, that goes for any sort of merchandising, that goes for any performance, period. We've all of us working in the creative arts have to have enough consumers that have the interest, the time to participate, and the money, the expendable income. And when all of that when those three go away or they start to be reduced, that is pushing against us on this side. On this side, you've got all that bandwidth online, but you're also competing now equally amongst, 30 million people. And you've got those pressures. And the question is, can we monetize this in a meaningful enough way in the next lifetime?
I mean, I wish I had a good answer for that, or like, I really don't know. Like, I don't. We've talked Spotify to death. I mean, we could talk advertisements, or I don't know. I'm not really sure where monetization goes from here. I really don't know. I know people have. I've actually talked to some of my actor friends who have been doing Zoom, like productions of plays that people are buying. People are buying virtual tickets to see plays via Zoom call, like we're doing right now.
Yeah.
And I've seen stuff like that. It's just, I have no idea if that's the direction this is going to go. This is, it's unprecedented. I don't know where it goes from there.
Huge technical challenge primarily. It requires a lot, like scaled up tech.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, for our band, we've all had to, like, in certain ways adapt, and putting on a stage production, streaming it live, putting on a sound for stage is hard enough as it is. I can only imagine needing to then stream it. It just sounds like learning experience, to be sure.
Especially when you're a band that relies heavily on whether it's recording studio or live, we don't realize until we're faced with those kind of challenges online, how much bands rely on a certain sound that's generated through all of them playing together, coupled with all the other people that are supporting that, to create that ambient, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not an exotic word, but I'm just getting tired.
I mean, like the sound of hitting the audience in the chest, like that.
Yeah,
sort of thing?
I mean, there's that. There's the whole when you're live and you literally feel music because it's vibrating.
It's going through the air. Yeah.
Right, right.
But there's also, I've been watching some of Fish's performances that they've been streaming or that were pre-recorded from years ago, and they're just going through their archive, and you can download that stuff for a fee or watch it live remote. And there's a band that has a very particular sound, and that sound was not only produced by the people playing, but the people who support that live performance, the sound people, the back of house and all that. Once that all gets eliminated and you're hearing it through this thing, your device or whatever, it doesn't have the same kind of impact. It just can't.
We do.
So it also relies partially on people suspending reality and saying, no, I get that. You know what I mean? And right now, the only way I can listen to it is this way.
I think with Western education, like I think I'm more optimistic in that regard, because we're not really one of these like garagey play it live, hit record and put the record out. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, Will, you can speak on this too, but our music is, heavily intentional. Our recording process takes a long time. It's very deliberate. So when we go about a live stream, the production elements are gonna remain intact or almost entirely. Because when we play live, we're using production tracks in the show.
Right.
So
okay.
I don't foresee us having the problem that maybe Fish would have, or a band that's an experience sort of band. I don't know if I foresee that, because our productions and live show, sure, they sound different, sure, on a basic level, but I don't foresee that being an issue with us personally.
I get you.
Yeah, I'd agree. Since our shows are very regimented, and I think we make music that you can enjoy sitting down.
Right.
Well, I think I feel pretty good about it. I'm excited to see what kind of new projects we're going to be thinking about for some of these new releases.
So we're rounding out our episode here. I'm wondering, gentlemen, if there are other things that we have not touched upon that you'd like our listeners to know about yourselves, the band.
Wow, anything?
Anything.
Wow.
Super intellectually rigorous thoughts. I mean,
the opposite.
Or the opposite. I mean, listen, we're Western education. We're going to be putting a new record out because of COVID. There's no promises of when that's going to be. We are going to be putting out a stream of content, a stream of singles. I think we've worked, really hard as a band. We've known each other for a long time, and through COVID, we've learned a lot as young men. So all I want to say is everything is a learning experience. I hope I've gotten better over time. And I don't know if Will has anything philosophical to add, but
I mean, I don't really have anything philosophical. I'll just echo Greg. We are Western education. We are coming out with new music, and it is probably our best work ever. We're very much still here. We are still active. We're still writing, and just get ready.
Hell yeah. As someone
Excellent.
that listened to your guys' catalog the past couple weeks, I'm fucking excited. So I can't wait for it to drop. So
I would have loved if you just came in with, man, it sucked. I didn't like it.
I don't want to listen to it. No,
we're really excited for this new one. It's definitely a step above. We spent so long writing it, both lyrically, arrangement wise. It doesn't sound like anything we've done in the past, and we're very proud. We can't wait to just drop these new tracks, and you're going to be hearing a lot from us.
Hell yeah. I'm excited.
Folks listening, all of the band's information, their website, their Bandcamp presence, all their social media presence, and information on the band, including videos and other things, will be featured on their episode page at SMG's Are We Here Yet podcast page. I'm just excited. This was a great episode. So I want to
thank you for having us.
Thank you so much. This was an excellent conversation and a really good time.
This is
thank you.
This is up there with, I think, the best either interviews / conversations we've ever done. It's up there. I really enjoyed this one, and I'm not just saying that because I'm here. If I didn't like it, I would say nothing.
I feel like I know you just enough to know that you're probably telling mostly the truth. So I feel
Mostly. I'll just call Will after and talk shit. No, it's just
those fucking guys.
all those guys.
No,
Yeah, it
this
was
is
awesome for you guys to be on. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah,
It was,
thank
it was
you.
a
It
great
was
time.
Yeah, anytime, absolutely.
Yeah, great job, Cam, as always, as our trusty and intrepid producer.
Yeah, I try. I give it
And
my
great
best.
questions too. You know, this is one of those shows. And people have started to comment now that we've got enough of a listenership as we've developed our show and said like, "Wow, you let your producer talk a lot." And I'm like,
Yeah.
I produced the damn thing. So
We
I
always
should
have the
be
best
able to.
opinions about stuff. So
somebody was like, "Yeah, it's like the Howard Stern show." I'm like, "Well, it's not really."
I
like
hope
Howard
not. Yeah, right.
That would
What do
make
some
me
people-
Howard Stern. And I mean, he seems like he's probably in real life a nice guy, but I just don't want that to be.
What do people say? Like on
thing.
the Sports Hub, Jimmy Stewart doesn't talk. Why does he talk so much?
Don't let him talk. Don't let him say
Yeah.
things.
a stereotypical producer, he hangs out in the back, and when someone asks him a question, then they just dump a bunch of knowledge,
Oh,
Yeah.
right.
whether silent
Like,
otherwise.
wow, he's the smartest guy here.
The
Folks,
Steve Irwin way.
New for spring 2021 is going to be, among other things, in a few weeks, we are on the SMG Are We Here Yet podcast as a music feature, our first music feature, a bi-weekly special called The Jazz Room. It features our host, Joan Watson-Jones, a very experienced jazz musician, multi-instrumentalist, and singer in her own right from New England and Harlem, featuring interviews and jam sessions with top artists from around the world. This month, we'll be featuring the likes of both Eddie Palmieri and also Michael Feinstein. Yes, that's the Jazz Room, which will be premiering, our first episode premiering on the 15th of January, 2021. And later in the spring, we have the Mental Suppository. That's right, you heard right, the Mental Suppository. Quite an interesting menagerie of pop culture, pulp fiction, live action script, comic book oriented thing, all kinds of some really cool stuff. If you liked Dr. Demento in a prior generation, you're going to like the Mental Suppository, hosted by my good buddy Brett Herholz and company. And then lastly, I have to say, we've got our very own Cam McLeod and a serialized program. Would you like to say anything about your show, Cam?
It's going to be fantastic. You know, I've been really putting in the work and the scripting, trying to figure this shit out. So I'm excited, and I hope the people that listen to it are just as excited and love it when it comes out just as much as I'm loving it right now.
And folks, that's not just hyperbole. Cam is literally in this serialized program figuring stuff out. The title gives away an indication of what this is about. It's Cam's journey through the zombie apocalypse.
Oh, it's gonna be a good time. I'm excited.
My boys,
Spoiler, I survived.
You know
my
what
boys
people
growing up.
You know what people never think about when it comes to a zombie apocalypse? To end this on a weird note here.
Sure.
What
Of course.
everybody says they want to live through a zombie apocalypse and they want to like be up against zombies. Do you know how bad the smell would be in a real zombie apocalypse?
Overwhelming.
You know what?
Overwhelming.
I actually thought about that.
Apocalypses only work on the USA Network.
Yep. Just think about that.
That's
Yeah.
not enough deodorant in the world for sure.
Yep.
Ride the
Well,
green line, you get the same experience.
Oh. Oh, come on.
On those two notes,
Yeah.
ladies and gentlemen, you have been listening to SMG's Are We Here Yet podcast. Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Fantastic job, guys.